For me, the upcoming interview with Tony Moore, whose career has taken him from the very earliest days of Iron Maiden through Radio Java and Cutting Crew to writing with Julian Lennon and to his latest album and accompanying tour for Awake, proves that some musicians spend a lifetime becoming the artist they were always meant to be. His story is of someone not driven by commercial expectation, but by curiosity and a determination to follow his own creative path. This is a refreshing take on what success really is, and on the humanity of a man who has taken personal experience and created a work that resonates deeply with his audience and who provides an inspiration for us all. Tony Moore. So Tony Moore, welcome. This is a great pleasure. I've been listening to the music and watching interviews with you, and find a lot of your philosophy of life really fascinating. And there are some connections, but I'm going to start really with your early days, because your mother was a ballet dancer, I understand, and your father was a classical pianist and tenor.
Yeah.
So was performance part
Yeah.
of the atmosphere in your home?
In a weird way, yes. And I say weird because my mum had retired from ballet to become a mum. So she wasn't professionally dancing at that time. And my father, although an astonishingly gifted classical pianist and a wonderful, wonderful tenor, had stage fright. So he never pursued performance as a career. But in the house, he would play all the time. And my mum would just dance in and dance out. Everything for her was a performance. So the door would fling open when she'd come in and she'd do a little pirouette. And she was very theatrical. So yes, it was a theatrical kind of home. And I was both impressed and terrified of my dad, because when he'd hit a top C, the room would shake. It was like, whoa, this is kind of scary.
Your mother was also into the Beatles, wasn't she?
She adored the Beatles. She was a 60s hippie, a child of the 60s. So she loved that. She loved, if you're going to go to San Francisco, wear some flowers in your hair. But she loved the Beatles particularly. So there was always Beatles music playing. And we had, the younger generation probably won't understand this, but we had an old Garrard record player. It was Valve. And so when you turned on, he had to wait for the valves to warm up, and there was dust on the valves, and there was like a little velvet cloth on the turntable, and there was a smell. So every time I would listen to records, I would associate this dusty, hot valve smell with listening to the records. And what I loved about having the records was listening to the B-sides. So even with the Beatles, they'd have some amazing B-sides. I remember there's one of the B-sides, I think it's for maybe Hey Jude, it's called You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. The weirdest piece of music, like some strange mixture of the Goons and pre-Monty Python silliness, but with Beatles musicality. Yeah, she loved them, and by default I loved them as well.
But you had piano lessons but couldn't actually read music, or maybe weren't too interested in reading music.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, my dad was a sight reader, so you could put any music in front of him and he could play it. And I think the definition of a sight reader is that if you've never seen it before, you play it perfectly, as opposed to just reading music, where if it might be something you played a lot. But he never played anything without the music. He didn't memorize anything, and he didn't write anything. Although he did pretend to have written something that was a bit obscure that wasn't his for my mum, and said he wrote it for to try and impress her. Whereas when they sent me for piano lessons, I found that I was the total opposite. I found that reading music for me, it didn't click. It didn't line up. There was a mismatch in my brain. And I'm sure this is true of many musicians trying to learn to read music. For me, it was like if I was having a conversation with you and I had to look every word up in a dictionary before I could use it. That was the kind of unnatural connection I had with music. So what I would do is I would learn the piece, I'd listen to it, and I'd memorize it. I didn't realize, of course, that I was training my ear very early on. And I'd come along and I'd pretend that I was reading it, but I was playing because I'd memorized it. And I'd always get caught out. He'd know. I sometimes have a little rap on the back of the knuckles. Those were the early days of corporal punishment still. So I went for a few months. I didn't like it. It didn't excite me. And also I didn't want to be playing classical music. You know, I wanted to be playing something else, something more contemporary. What I did find though was that when I was sat at the piano, if I made up something on the piano, nobody could tell me I was wrong. And I think I've been a little bit like that in life ever since, which is if I do it myself, you can't tell me it's wrong because I've done it my way. Right? This is the way I want to do it. So that led me into composition at quite an early age. So I was making up little pseudo classically pieces of music. And of course, when you're 11 or 12, you don't have much life experience to sing about, or actually I did have quite a lot of life experience, but I didn't know how to turn that into a lyric. So I used to find poems and put them to music. The first one I did was from Wind in the Willows. There's a poem called Duck's Tails, Drake's Tails, Yellow Feet a Quiver, something going down the river, and I put that to music. That was my kind of way to write a song. And then as I got a bit older, I developed into writing my own lyrics.
Were you the class clown at school?
Well, here's the thing. When I left school when I was around 16, 17, when you could leave school. And I've got all my school reports still. And they all say could do better, always messing around, doesn't pay attention. And I don't think quite the cliche of class clown, but definitely, yeah, he's playing for attention and whatever, right? So I left school thinking I was a failure. And academically, I was a failure. I got 2 O levels, English literature and English language. That was it. But I signed up for an old school reunion drinks evening in London 9 months ago or something. So this was the first time I'd reconnected with the school since I left in 1975, 76. And I went along and everyone was so happy to see me. And the headmaster, the current headmaster, because it's a different generation now, right? He went, "Oh, Tony, it's so great that you're here. I'm a massive Iron Maiden fan. You've done so well. We're so proud of you." And I was so touched that my school was proud of what I'd achieved, despite the fact it was not academic, but I've gone off into the world and made music my career. And so we've got to the point. I went back and did a visit to the school, and I'm going to do an awake concert there in November to raise money for the bursary for supporting. I went to the school on an assisted place because my parents didn't have much money, and I won it's not quite a scholarship, but it was a very, very cheap place. It was subsidized. So I'm going to do and they still do that. So I'm going to do a concert, and we'll give all the proceeds and the profits to the bursary fund to help kids be able to come to Bristol Grammar School who couldn't normally afford it. So in a weird way, there's a little circle that's complete. The class clown has come back to entertain them.
I think what's interesting as well is that your perspective is so different can be so different from the reality that we all hold that sometimes. Our perspective of ourselves, of what we've done, what we've achieved even, can be seen differently by other people.
Absolutely. It's, I think the true definition of success for everybody is, and should be in people's heads, to be able to do what you love. Now, it doesn't matter that you are as famous as, if you're an entrepreneur, if you've come up with an entrepreneurial idea, you don't have to be as successful as Richard Branson and the Virgin Group to call yourself successful if you are able to use your idea to make some money and to move forward in life. So there's so many things that I am yet to achieve, that I desire to achieve, that I'm aiming to achieve. But on the journey to get to those places, every day I wake up and do other thing that I love, which is make music. So I'm already successful, and I understand that other people look at my life and they go, "Oh, blinking heck, Tony, you've done this and you've done that and you do that and you do that and you make music. Wow, well done." And you're quite right. Sometimes the perspective of success objectively is different from your sense of success subjectively. So,
it changes throughout your life. You don't necessarily have the same view throughout your life. You can see it differently, because when you were young, you saw, you were actually, I think you were about 14 when you saw David Bowie as Ziggy Stardust on stage. And I just wondered, when you
yes.
saw someone like that on stage, whether you saw someone who embodied success because of fame, recognition, or was it because he had the freedom to do, and the balls to do what he wanted? You know what I mean? So I've just wondered where your perception of success really came from, and has it changed from when you were a child?
Yeah, well, as you quite rightly say, over time it changes. It has evolved. I mean, you have to understand, as you well do, that to have seen Ziggy Stardust the first time, not a tribute act, not a rehash many tours down the line, but the original tour was almost literally mind-blowing. It was artistically, creatively mind-blowing to see somebody do something I had never seen done before, and hear music played in a way I'd never heard it played before, because there was no marker for it, right? So, if you see a band today wearing masks, you can go, "Oh yeah, well, Slipknot did that," and with makeup, you say Kiss did that before, and there's a lineage, right? It's almost impossible to do something now that is mind-blowingly different. It's a variation on what's been done before. Even what I'm doing is a variation on the things that I saw and the stuff that it inspired me, and I'm trying to find my way of doing it. But then there was no historical reference point. It's just like it came out of it, like it was like an alien landed on the planet and went, "Oh my God." It was sensational. And I had the same feeling when I saw Genesis doing Foxtrot with Peter Gabriel. I couldn't believe that music and performance could be that. And I wanted to be that. I grew up desperate to be Genesis, Pink Floyd, Alice Cooper, early Elton John, all of those great musical leaders of the early 70s. I wanted to be all of them in one. And it's taken me until now to be able to put together a show where I'm able to do the things that I love that are inspired. My whole show is although original music, it's original music through the lens of 70s theatrical rock, and the even something like The Wall, which came in 1980, the end of the 70s, was Pink Floyd had already been originators of the weird and wonderful, and Dark Side of the Moon had already been one of the biggest selling albums for 5 years. How on earth do you go from that and then you arrive with The Wall, which redefines how you can do a live performance, where by the interval you've built a wall between you and the audience, and then the show begins and the band, you can't even see the band. It was breathtaking to be a part of that period growing up as a musician, and I wanted to be all of that. And yes, as a kid, you go, "I want to be famous," yeah, but I don't want to be famous for the sake of being famous. Right? I make music that I hope to be more and more successful as it continues, so that my profile grows, so that I can do more of what I already love to do, not to satisfy my ego, but to satisfy the songwriter and performer in me that has created this thing that so far so many people have been supportive of and love and enjoy, that I know I can take it further. And it's just finding the right way to move it to raise the profile.
It's interesting what you said, because I feel like with progressive rock, there's a complexity to it. There's a sort of sense of storytelling, and there's a theatricality that you mentioned. And with Bowie, he's also creating this world. There is a complete world around Bowie.
Oh, yes.
From even his influences that come onto stage, and from dance, mime, just everything. And that creating a world is, in a sense, what we do as children through music, you know, and the world is what protects us when we're a child, don't we? You know, we go into our own bedroom, play music and
Yes,
escape
exactly.
from the family.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'd spend hours and hours with a record player and playing like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the Genesis album, that full blast, and and dancing around the room, imitating the Peter Gabriel and Genesis I'd seen at the Bristol Colston Hall, and channeling and pretending I was in that moment with them. And it's a great way to let off steam, if you want, or to escape the world you're in. And of course, the world I came from, you know, in the 70s was a weird time in the UK. We had all the power cuts. We had the rubbish collectors strikes. We had the problems with Harold Wilson's government. It was a very dark period, and of course there was no technology. There was no escape from it. I remember going to bed with candles and a box of matches because there would be a power cut and you'd see nothing in the house. So I'd have to, you know, it's like you you can't send kids to bed now with candles and matches and say there might be no lights. No one can imagine what it was like to be in that world. And then for something like Bowie, that was almost luminous within that darkness, that brought great big golden shafts of light to bear upon an audience, and we're all just, yeah, I mean, I know we're screaming and shouting. I was in the second row of the stalls. In order to get to see that Bowie concert, I went down at midnight to the venue and joined the queue and slept all night until 9 o'clock the next morning because there was no internet to buy tickets on. There was no telephone hotline. You had to go to the venue, and we all knew it was going to sell out. So I'm there with my sleeping bag in a doorway. About 2 a.m. My mum comes down with a thermos of hot tomato soup and some peanut butter sandwiches, which was my favorite little snack. And of course, I'm trying to be cool. Oh, mum, no, go away, mum, leave me alone, you know, like kids do. But actually, she left it, and it was a very, very grateful Anthony. That's what I was called then. Very little grateful Anthony that about 3 o'clock in the morning had some hot soup and some fabulous peanut butter sandwiches to get me through the night. I loved my mum so much. She cared so much, you know, and I was just an average teenager kicking back at, you know, being looked after. I'm big and tough. I don't need looking after, but actually, I really appreciated it.
In 1977, you answered an ad for a band called Iron Maiden, which no one would have known
Yes,
at that time. Was there
at the
anything
time.
you knew
Yeah.
about the band? And I wonder what happened when you turned up to the audition with Steve Harris.
Well, I'm sure in the East End of London, people knew about the band, but nationally, nobody had ever heard of the band. And I don't know who created the advert because Dennis Wilcock, who was the singer at the time, it was his phone number that I answered. He was quite proactive in the promotion of Maiden at the time. But whoever came up with the idea understood the concept of marketing very well because it was a box advert. It wasn't just like a couple of lines, right? In fact, nowadays it's hard to imagine that because we don't look at adverts in the back of newspapers anymore. It's all marketplace on Facebook or Craigslist a little while ago, whatever, right? But back in the day, you paid for how your advert looked. So if your advert was just a few lines of text, it was much cheaper than having a box and bigger text and capitals and everything. So you'd have to pay more for it. But they realized that actually putting adverts looking for musicians was also a marketing opportunity. So they created a big box ad and they put Iron Maiden in great big capitals at the top, something rock band, looking for seriously tasty drummer with big setup and keyboard player with synth, which I had. I just bought a little Korg synthesizer. And then at the bottom it said, no idiots. This was a real thing back in the day in these adverts, right? They go, no breadheads, right? Because if it's an originals band and someone comes in and goes, how much you paying me, man? That was a breadhead, right? So there was these little things they stick about. I hadn't seen that before. No idiots. As if an idiot would go, ooh, am I an idiot? I am, but I'm going to apply anyway. So I applied. I've rang the number. I've got an audition slot. I was living in Bristol. I grew up in Bristol in the west of England, and the audition was in the east of London behind Mile End Station. No sat nav. I had what we lovingly remember as the A to Z, which was like a novel, but with each page was a bit of London on a map. And I came up with my girlfriend Sally at the time, put all my gear in the back of my Austin 1100, tiny little car. And I drove up to the rehearsal room. We set the gear up. And I think the two things that impressed me, first of all, one was it was in a rehearsal room. I'd never been in a rehearsal room. You know, with my school band, we'd always rehearsed in the basement of my mum's house or where I grew up. We had a big space and we put all our gear in there, right? We'd never been to a place to rehearse. So that was kind of exciting in itself, just to be in a, you know, designated, specially built rehearsal room with all the sound treatment on the walls and the big heavy doors and everything. And then the second thing was how loud it was, because it was a room full of massive amplifiers. I think Steve had an Ampeg 8x10. I'm sure he just rented it there, but it was, you know, those really tall Ampeg things. And when we started, although I didn't know it at the time, in retrospect, it was a little bit like that scene from Back to the Future. You've seen Back to the Future, right? Where Marty plugs the electric guitar in at the dog's place and plays the first chord. And it was a little bit like that emotionally, because it was just very loud and the band were really tight, right? They knew what they were doing. And I was just trying to find gaps to play some keyboards in it. This is all stuff that was on the first Maiden album. So if you can imagine the first Maiden album with a Wurlitzer keyboard, which is mainly a piano sound, right? And a little synth, there's not much space to fit keyboards in there. It's not really keyboardy. But there was a reference in the ad to a band called Lone Star, who just had a big hit with a song called The Bells of Berlin, which I don't know if you know. Do you know the song Bells of Berlin?
No, I don't.
If you don't, go and research it. It's a fantastic piece of music. It's very proggy, and it's actually quite maidenly in style, in the drum groove and the rhythm. But lots of very cool dual lead guitar and synth. And I think as they were going through variations, because that song was quite influential at the time, they thought, oh, maybe we could have a keyboard player. So anyway, I did the audition. I don't know how long it was, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it was. And then the band went off into the corridor and closed the door and had a little chat. And then they came back in and they went, yeah, you're in. Do you want to join the band? And I went, yes. So now I had to arrange to move to London. And Steve Harris was living with his grandmother, with his nan, in Steel Road in Leytonstone at the time. And I had nowhere to stay, so I went to stay with him for the first month or two until I'd found
he had a real vision
share
for the band, didn't he?
And oh, yeah, he never said this all at the same time in one go, but over the period I was with him, you could distill down into three statements what Steve believed, right? The first one was, we're going to be the cutting edge of new British rock. And he was completely right. You know, remember at that time we'd come out of a disco period and there was a big pop thing happening, and rock had kind of taken a few steps back by 76, 77, right? So, and as we now call it, it's the new wave of heavy metal band, the No Wob or whatever, however you pronounce it. And there was Maiden kind of led the charge in that. So he was completely right in that. Laser-like focus, right? He still has it. He knows exactly what has to be done and why it has to be done and what he's going to do about it. So the second thing, we were both massive Genesis fans and prog fans. Loved Jethro Tull and the sensational Alex Harvey band, but we loved Genesis, both of us, enormously. And he said, we're going to have a stage show as big as Genesis, right? And for a 17 going on 18-year-old, this was exciting things to hear, right? That's exactly what I want. I want to be in a band with a stage show as big as Genesis. And the third thing he said is, we're going to be one of the biggest bands in the world. Now, all three of those things are absolutely what happened, and they absolutely happened because Steve Harris decided that's what was going to happen. He's always been very focused in what he wants to do, and and naturally instinctively aware of what not to do, right? The things to avoid and stay away from, but keep the focus, right? And that's why he's nicknamed the boss, or the, sometimes people take the mickey and, say he's the ruler, but it's kind of true. It's like what Steve says goes, because it's his band. He started it on, was it Christmas Day 1975, and he's the only original member of the original lineup member still in the band. So they're doing a 50th anniversary tour, but for the rest of the band, it's like 45 years or whatever, right? Because Di'Anno's gone now, sadly, and even there's no one in the band from that very original lineup. Even, and I, as you know, I tour with Steve and British Lion, his other band, a lot. So that's the two of us, and for two of the British Lion shows in Spain and Portugal, I played keyboards for British Lion because the keyboard player, Brent, couldn't make it. So there was a weird moment in time where Steve and I are back playing in the same band on the same stage for the first time in 48 years. And it was nice. It was fun sitting in the rehearsals.
But there was a period where you were rehearsing with them, and then you played this gig, which I think was in Canning Town. And that was a moment.
Yes, the Bridge House.
Sorry, Bridge House. Yes, that's it, in Canning Town. And that was a moment where you realized that the keyboards that you played didn't fit within the band, which is an amazing decision.
Well, I just, at the end of that gig, it just felt like this wasn't the right mix. And I thought to myself, I can't see how this mix can work properly as it is. It didn't seem to be the right mix, both me and everything that took place with everybody else at the gig as well. So I answered yet another advert in the Melody Maker. And I went for an audition with Brian James, who'd been the guitarist in The Damned and written Neat, Neat, Neat and New Rose. He was putting a new band together, and they offered me the gig. I'm good at auditions. So I called Steve and I said, I'm sorry, I'm leaving the band. And it was very amicable. It wasn't, I didn't hate anything, or, it just felt, I realized as I look back that I've always followed my instinct. What did my gut feeling tell me? I do what my gut tells me most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. And so I joined this band with Brian James. In the meantime, over the next few months, Dennis, the singer, left, and Terry, the guitarist, left, and Thundersticks left. But Dennis left as the singer because they formed a band called V1. And I think that, I don't know if they had a keyboard player, but part of the story was he wanted to be in a band with a keyboard player. But interestingly enough, that meant that Steve now had a band with no singer in it. He was already, always great friends with Davey. I remember before I left, we went to see the band that both Davey and Adrian were in, Urchin. We went to see them at the North, something in Kentish Town, a pub gig that's not there anymore. It was a great gig. And I remember him even then wanting to get Davey back in the band because he'd been in the band previously and then left. But a friend of his one night at a pub said, "Oh, if you're looking for a singer, try this guy, Paul Di'Anno." And suddenly the perfect storm arrived. The perfect conditions for the Iron Maiden storm arrived. Di'Anno, Davey, Steve. That was the singer the band needed, right? And actually, when you listen to the first two albums, didn't need a keyboard player. It wasn't until, what was it, Seventh Son, that keyboards start appearing on a Maiden album. Those first albums didn't need keyboards. They were better without keyboards, really, because it was a much more raw, aggressive, punchy sound with just the guitars and the twin lead guitar stuff going on. So, ironically, I like to think to myself that my leaving was the key to their success, right? If I'd have stuck around, maybe the balance hadn't have changed, and the next stage wouldn't have happened. But because Diano was such a great front man and had the voice, right? That those, you know, and the debate rages still to this day, Diano or Bruce, right? Which Maiden version was the, you know, actually they both complement each other in my money, right? It's like, and when you hear Bruce sing Iron Maiden or Prowler or any of the early songs, or what's the second song in the set right now? They start with Murders in the Rue Morgue and then Rothschilds, or when he sings Rothschild, it's like he could have been the singer then as well, right? Bruce brings a slightly more theatrically operatic, rock operatic thing to play in his voice, but he's still capable of singing those early songs and giving them the life that they deserve.
You said it jokingly, but you know, that you were a sort of trigger to their success. But having the courage
Yes.
to leave something that you at one point believed, you know, could really work, and at a young age, is also a form of success, because it's actually having the guts and the balls to say, this isn't for me. I will find something that suits me better.
Yes. Well, obviously I've been in London and probably about a year or so at this point, and kind of got my feet settled in a different world. And maybe that gave me some confidence, but I left thinking it was for the right reasons, right? For that it was better for me and better for the band that I stepped away. And again, this is a philosophy for life outside of music, right? There are times when you'll be in a situation where the situation is comfortable, but it's not right. And in those situations, you should move away from comfortable and move towards right, right? Because life is not a rehearsal, and most of the time we as humans live in the future. You know, a lot of the time we carry the past and the negative from the past and still allow it to hurt us, which I try and put away. But we very rarely live in the moment and understand that that is the only thing that's real. The only thing we can experience is now, here and now. And if we don't experience the here and now, we're missing out, because we can dream of all the things that we could have, but what if they never come? You've spent all the nows not experiencing and loving them enough, waiting for the thens to arrive that never come. And then it's the end of your life. And it's like, oh, that went quick. There's like a Monty Python line. Do you get another? No, sorry. That's like John Cleese, isn't it? Fawlty Towers. That was your life, mate. Oh, do I get another? No, sorry, mate. You have to make the most of every moment. So I try and just live in the moment and love the moment I'm in.
That's really fascinating, because you looked after your mother, who had dementia. I looked after my mother over a period of 10 years, the last 3 years with her. So it's sort of similar experience in that way. My mother didn't have dementia, so that was easier. I know that, you know, dementia must be very tough to deal with. But the thing for me is, what I realized while looking after my mother was to live in the moment, because we only had the moment. And that taught me that. And it took most of my life to really understand that.
And when you understand it, it's such a beautiful and powerful thing to experience. So with my mum's dementia, you know, she was always my biggest supporter, my biggest fan, my biggest encourager. And well into her late 80s, she was on Facebook. She was sending emails. Whenever I was doing, aside from being having a musical career, I've also created events where I've helped young emerging artists. I had a club called the Kashmir Club, which ran for 6 years in Marylebone and was the kind of cutting edge of acoustic stuff. No one was doing acoustic shows when I started this. It was just me doing it because I had nowhere else to play. But my mum was living in Bristol at the time, and she wanted to enjoy the show. So I worked out how to stream live music in 1998. Sky News came and did a documentary about me, right? About how this guy in a basement is reaching the world through music, right? Before anyone had ever heard of, there was no Facebook Live, right? I'd found a sponsor for the bandwidth, and the image was really small, but we had a chat room that went with it, and my mum ran the chat room. She watched the shows and she talked to people from all around the world who were watching the shows, and her screen name was Tony's mum. And she liked to be known as Tony's mum. That was her That was her preferred way to be referred to. And even when I took over a venue called the Bedford and we carried on doing the live streams, she would run the chat room until late into her 80s. She was always very present until the dementia. So that's what made the dementia doubly hard for me, is because I lost the person that was like, you know, nobody else in their late 80s even understood how to turn Facebook on or log in, right? She was really on top of this stuff. So I kind of lost that part of her. And the worst night for me was because I was doing these live streams. I'd moved her to London by now. And she had a house in southwest London, which I've inherited. I'm in now as I'm talking to you. And there's a big shed in the garden. So I moved all my gear into the shed because I'm a musician. I see a shed. I go, oh, that's a place to put gear. Set up. So I was doing live streams and I'd set up. Oh, I spent hours and hours working out how to have remote control lights and a remote control to turn the TV on. And I used a Mac Mini connected to the TV on the HDMI input so that she could watch YouTube easily. So I would set it up so she could watch my streams on YouTube. And the worst night was I came in, she was in an annex at the back, and I came in from the shed. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, hello. You're very much like my son, you know." And I said, "I am your son." And she went, "He plays piano as well, you know." And it broke my heart. You know, I cried all night. I grieved more then than when she died, because I kind of lost her, but she was still there. And I realized with dementia, there's many different variations. She was never what's the term for someone who suffers from dementia? You know, like someone who just suffers from mania is a maniac, right? Is it a dementianiac? Anyway,
Yeah,
I remember, and there's people that are mean, right? There's ones that are really rude to people and mean and horrible, who suffered from dementia because I guess they're scared or don't understand where they are. And the ones that can still walk sometimes just wander off, right? Well, she was bedridden, so I knew she couldn't wander off, but she was always nice and happy and fun, except for the carers that came to clean her. Right? She hated them. She'd scream at them, "They're killing me." But I remember, but you have to laugh, right? Because you can't deny their reality. You can't just say, "No, you're wrong," because they don't. And that's what they believe when they are incorrect in their belief, right? And I remember I brought a friend home, and I have a half sister, but I was brought up as an only child, right? So just me, one boy. And I remember I brought a friend home one night, and my friend said, "Oh, hello, I'm Anthony's friend." And my mum said, "Oh, he's my second favorite son, you know." There's only me, and I'm still second favorite. It's like, yeah, but you have to laugh. It's like, how more surreal can you get? I'm second out of one.
One thing that I look back on when looking after my mum is that I had a period where I could resolve any issues that we had throughout our lives. So I just wonder whether you were able to, if you had any issues, but if you were able to resolve and talk about things that you hadn't talked about and from a different perspective before the dementia kicked in.
Yes and no. I mean, the regret that I'd had was that as a touring musician and a traveling musician and living in London when she lived in Bristol, I didn't see her very often. And after my dad died in 91, she became very depressed. And I feel guilty that I wasn't more available for her. And she never, ever made me feel guilty for it. She never went, "Oh, Anthony, you never come and see me." She was always, "Oh, Anthony, yes, go for it." You know, she was always super encouraging. But in retrospect, I could see that she was so depressed. I could have helped that a lot, even though I was a long way away. I could have maybe gone to Bristol a bit more. But the last 2 years of her life, where the dementia started in 2020, the beginning of the lockdown, and I moved in, I got to tell her every single night that she's the best mum in the world and that I love her. So for me, that was partially me making up for the times that I hadn't been there for her. but also telling her the things in the simplest way possible that I would regret if I hadn't had the chance to tell them and she died and I hadn't spent that time with her. And whilst I was in the shed, I wrote Awake, the whole album, in 2 months, because there was nothing else to do, right? There was no, I also run music at a venue called the Bedford, but the Bedford had closed, so there was no music. So I had nowhere to go for 2 years, more or less, right? Because it was 2 lockdowns with some gaps in between. So although they were crazy, horrible, mad times, in the strangest possible way, they were the 2 best years of my life, because I got to spend them with my mum and I got to just make music and do the thing that I loved every single moment, and created now an album and a live show that for the last 4 years I've been touring all around the world, that would never have existed without that, lockdown madness. So for me personally, I know that it messed a lot of things up. A lot of businesses went out of business. A lot of relationships, a lot of people died alone because of the craziness of putting people in old people's homes and not letting their family visit them and all that stuff. But for me personally, they were 2 golden years of opportunity to spend time doing the thing I loved and tell the mum I loved how much I cared for her.
Don't go away. More Tony Moore coming up. But just time for me to ask you to like, subscribe, comment, and take a look at my website, popthehistorymakers.com, where you can find all the interviews.
The whole show is accompanied by video. So when I tour, I take an ultra short throw projector and a screen, so that wherever we go, if there is no bigger screen or a video wall, I can always do the show. And because of the video, which I've handcrafted to match the songs, it's a very immersive show. And she's in a lot of the video. Here's the weird thing I understood. People with dementia very often remember the lyrics and music as if they had no dementia. So I came home one night and she had my YouTube channel on and she was singing along with one of my songs. So I videoed her singing along with it. And because when I perform as a solo artist, the music track is embedded with the video, it's always in the same place. I dropped it in and she's in sync with my live performance. So on the 4th song, Just One Night, the very last chorus, she's in bed singing the chorus with me. So she features a lot, and that has a very emotional effect on audiences. I've had a lot of people come up to me in tears saying, "Oh, my granddad had dementia, and this really reminded me of that, and I looked after my mum and whatever." It has a cathartic effect on people because it allows you to, because it's a concert. You come with no expectations, and so it takes people by surprise who haven't got any defenses, right? And suddenly their emotions come bubbling out. And it's not that I wrote the songs or the music or some of the music to deliberately do that, but it is reflective of very emotional moments in my life, and these are universal touch points that carry on through the music. So she travels the world with me still. In fact, when I'm in South America, I speak a little Spanish, so I try and explain about, mi madre tuvi demencia en 2020 y me mudé para ser su cuidador. So that's basically my mum got dementia in 2020 and I moved in to become her carer. They understood all this, and every time a picture or a bit of video came up, they would cheer for her because South American audiences are very emotional and passionate anyway, but they understood the connection of family, and it was a very beautiful thing. That's when I was opening for British Lion, and we piggybacked the Iron Maiden 2024 tour down into South America.
You wrote, performed, you recorded and produced the entire work yourself, but also Steve Harris, in a sense, was involved through his opinion, because you were sending stuff backwards and forwards, weren't you?
I think deadlines are really important in life. And I think if more people attached a deadline to what they're doing, they would be more effective in what they set out to achieve. And I know this because I've done lots of things without deadlines and they've just fluttered on forever, right? I've got works that I started in 2018, 2017 that I still haven't finished because I gave myself no deadline. But so for this, I said, I'm going to give myself a deadline of 2 months. I'd written the opening song Awake, and so I'd played it, and so many people liked it that it felt like it was the opening track of an album that hadn't been written yet. So I thought, well, I just have to write the rest of the album. And so all of the songs were written consecutively. And I wanted it to be a concept album. I wanted to channel things like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon and Ziggy Stardust and all the things that felt that they were a cohesive piece of work, that one song led you to the next song, right? And so I deliberately created music that I felt as I was writing it would take a journey. And when I'd finish a piece, I go, okay, where's my mood? Where's the mood of the listener? Where can we go next? And I also wanted to surprise people. I wanted to have a selection of music that as you listen to it, you could have no idea what the next thing would be, right? It would take you completely by surprise. And there'd be ups and downs and things that make you laugh and things that make you think and things that might want to make you dance and so on. So 2 months. Now, to write 16 songs in 2 months is quite a challenge, just to write them. But to write, record, and produce them in 2 months, I look back and I go, I don't know how I did that. It was like, I don't take, this is not to be po-faced. I don't take any drugs, and I never have done. I've never taken cocaine or heroin or ketamine, or I don't like putting chemicals in my body. And from a kid, I've never wanted to do that. I'd like to keep my body as pure as possible, not because it's a temple, and just because I'm scared of putting shit inside my body, what it might do to me. And so I grew up, even until my mid-20s, I didn't even really drink anything. It wasn't until I joined Cutting Crew in 1987 and we went on tour, and suddenly I didn't have to drive a car and I didn't have to be responsible outside of doing the gig. We had a tour manager to look after us, that I started drinking Jack Daniels and Coke quite a lot and quite enjoyed it. It felt like I had inspirational and emotional cocaine and speed in me, right? It's like I channeled some kind of force that kept me going, partly because there was nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. And I'd spend all day and all night in the shed working on music and following my instinct. But every time I'd finish a track, I would send it to Steve, partly because we'd reconnected a year or two before, after not speaking to each other for 35, 40 years, and had built a really wonderful connection again. And it almost felt like it was still 1977 in a weird way, right? Steve has not changed in the slightest. Obviously, he's incredibly successful and Maiden, probably the biggest rock metal band in the world, and on their own terms. But he's still the nicest, kindest, most generous friend you could want to have. And most of his friends are the friends he had when he went to school, right? He's just a very genuine person, right? And he tries to be as genuine as he can with the fans. If there's a couple of dozen people before a British Lion gig that wants an album signed, he'll try and do it all and take pictures and do everything. He's happy to do it. But if there's 200, he might not, because he'll never be able to do 200, and it will become a mosh pit of madness. And so he has to be careful and selective about how much time he can give to people, both not to disappoint people and not to overwhelm himself. But he's super open about things like that. So knowing that we both love Genesis and knowing that there was a lot of proggy elements floating through the music, I hoped he would like it. And he loved every song. Some of the songs he would come back with he'd come back with positive notes. He'd go, well, you can make the guitar solo a bit longer there, Tony, or I love that song. Maybe make the orchestra sound bigger, or everything that he came back with was a positive. And he never said, I don't like this one. He said, nah, because we have a relationship where he can be, and he often is, completely honest, right? No filters. If he doesn't like something, he'll tell you. Well, not to be brutal, but the effect could be brutal to people, because he'll just tell you what he thinks. So he could have just said, don't think that's very good, Tony. He wouldn't say, oh, that's shit. He might say, it's not your best work, or you could do that better, or whatever. He never said that. He only said you could put some more guitar in that, or you could extend that a bit longer, or whatever, right? You know, he was just thinking, because he thinks creatively all the time. And I listened to his words and trust his judgment, because he is a man who steered a band. How many albums have they had now? I don't know. Was it 15, 18, 20? I don't know how many albums it is. Through a career with no media support, because the media never talk about Maiden unless they've done something specific. Through no radio support, because unless it's a rock station, specifically like Planet Rock or something, no radio station will ever play them. No social media talks about them except for their own group, right? I mean, I often have the weird experience of being with some normal people and say, oh, you know, I used to be an Iron Maiden. And every now and then someone would pop up and say, oh, are they still going? It's like, the Nebworth. They're doing the biggest tours they've ever done in their lives, ever. Yes, of course they're still going. But it's because they've built their own audience, right? And this is all part of, I don't think Steve set out to build an audience outside of the mainstream. But because the mainstream didn't support them, they just toured and did what they did, right? So now you've even got the situation where there's two completely different markets for their t-shirts. So there's the fans, right? You go to Nebworth, you buy the Nebworth t-shirt, or you buy the new album t-shirt, or you just buy the new generation of merch that comes out every 18 months or whatever as a fan around the world. And if you've ever been to a Maiden concert, you'll know that the lines for people to buy t-shirts, which aren't cheap, has to be said, is longer than lines for people going into most gigs. It's just nuts. But then the secondary market, of course, is the world of people who don't really know who Iron Maiden is, but they know the t-shirt and they buy it because it's fashionable. And suddenly you end up with Primark and Next and H&M selling Iron Maiden t-shirts and merch after they've already been the first wave of Iron Maiden fans, because they don't want to go back to people that may have already bought a t-shirt on a mailing list or whatever and go, buy the new t-shirt. They go, well, I've already got it. It's an insult, right? But there's another market out there. Oh, there's a few other bands that benefit, probably Guns N' Roses and Metallica, but not many other bands have a market that's just purely fashion, that buy it because they like the look and the name on it because other people have worn it. So, you know, Maiden is a unique and an amazing embodiment of years of work and years of focus. And, you know, you haven't asked the question, and you may not ask the question, but people do say to me, do you regret leaving Iron Maiden? And of course, my answer is no. Partly because of what I said at the very beginning. If I'd have stayed, maybe that trajectory would not have taken off. Maybe the lineup with me in it would not have been the right lineup. Who knows, right? So that's one reason I don't regret it. But the second is that I've had a long, full, and very rich life. You know, I've done some amazing things. I've been all over the world. I've had a great life. I have nothing to regret. But now I feel like I'm 19 with my brand new music, trying to take on the world again. Right? I'm at this age, which we don't have to mention right now. I feel like I'm still an emerging artist in the world. It's kind of crazy.
Well, also, you've become the sort of front man. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've become a center point instead of the person supporting the other people. I mean, two things that are really fascinating, I think, is that, when your departure, let's call it, from Iron Maiden when you were young, you followed them. You didn't give up on them. You followed them.
Oh, yes.
You were interested in their career. And
I went to most of the tours. I love what they were doing.
He noticed that.
Well, actually, he didn't notice that. That was one of the ironic things, right? Because I'd in the latter years, I got to know Rod Smallwood, the manager, and his wife Kathy very well. So in later years, he would be the one that organized tickets for me, right? I think when I was much younger, I went through the record label. I don't remember how I managed to get tickets, but I remember I went to see them in Berlin. I was actually working in Berlin at the time. I was working on a movie as an actor, and they were playing, I think it's called Waldrew. It's behind the Olympic Stadium. It was an area built by Hitler for political speeches. It's quite a weird space, but an amazing space, right? It's like an amphitheater. And I got tickets for that, and I saw Steve backstage, but he didn't recognize me, and he was deep in conversation, and I didn't like to butt in. And anyway, so years later when we reconnected, he goes, I just found out that you've been coming to all the concerts over the years and you never said anything. I said, well, I didn't want to bother you. You're busy. You're doing your thing, right? And I'm not like a fan that wants to come up and hang around with you. I came because I enjoy the shows and I love the music. And an Iron Maiden experience is like nothing else, right? And through my half sister, I've got some my nieces all loved Maiden growing up. So I used to manage to get tickets for them as well. Back in the Hammersmith Odeon days, right, which is a long time ago now. And Steve was, I think, nicely and pleasantly, but surprised that I'd been, following the band's tour and still coming. Yeah, because I was very proud, and I still am, of the little role that I played. I was part of this story that extends over 50 years now, and I'm in the Infinite Dreams book, and I'm in the program for Nebworth, obviously, because I played there. And Steve has been a great friend and kept me close and has done an enormous amount to raise the profile of what I'm doing. And he loves Awake. It's one of his favorite things. Every night that we're on tour together with British Lion, he will find a way to watch the show. He'll be behind the PA stacks, or he'll be up in the gallery that they haven't opened, or he'll be somewhere watching the show and enjoying it. And he does that as a friend and kind of as a fan in a weird way. He's super supportive, and his I think his mentorship and his musical blessing, as it were, obviously has introduced me to a much wider range of Iron Maiden fans that might have half read about me in a book years ago. Suddenly I'm still a very prominent musical figure in the Maiden universe.
I mean, you've mentioned before that Tony Moore is a little bit of a butterfly, sort of, flitting from one thing to another. Is this Awake made you much
That's
more...
what it said in my school report.
Has this made you more focused?
Yes, well, interestingly, that was one of the comments in my school reports. He's got a butterfly mind, right? And I do. I've never tested it or had it analyzed. I suspect that I'm on a little bit of some kind of ADHD spectrum. I don't know. I get easily distracted by stuff, and I like to do the things that I like to do, and I don't like to do the things that I don't like to do. But you're completely right. With Awake, I mean, before Awake, I've been writing songs and releasing music all my whole life. But I don't think I quite knew who I was. Right? I'd write songs that I was very proud of and that I loved, but it was a little bit, everything was a bit random, I guess, a bit butterfly-y, bit of this, bit of that. I do some of this, I do some of that. But with Awake, it's a thing. And for the first time in my life, I have a thing, which is me, right? Awake, nobody else can do Awake. I have a really good friend, Khan, who's an amazing musician. His name's Omar Khan. He's just released his own album. It's called Pareidolia. He's in the kind of territory of Satriani and Vai, phenomenal guitarist. But he's also my live sound engineer, because that's partly what he does as well for money. And when I go on the road, I take him out as my engineer, and we have a lot of fun together. He's a really good mate. And he has learnt quite a lot of the guitar parts. There are times where we have done songs from Awake, which normally is a track. We've done them live, and he plays my guitar parts. It's quite weird hearing someone else play my guitar parts and doing them, really, really well, and sounding like them playing my guitar parts, because a lot of the tone comes from how you deliver the notes on a guitar, right? But within that world, I understand that I have created, and if anyone was going to be an official Tony Moore tribute, it would be him. But he doesn't play piano quite the way I do. So in order to do my show, you have to spend your life being a keyboard player, and guitarist and singer and have lived the experiences that I've lived to kind of understand how to deliver the show that I do and to create all the visuals. Because I'm not giving them to you unless you give me a cut of the door. Yes.
Just want to ask you at the end, do you think your greatest success is not that everything worked out as you hoped in your life, but nothing managed to stop you?
Ooh, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I think you're probably right. Yet, right? I'm still on the journey. I still haven't given up, right? And here's the secret, kids. Whatever you do in life, don't give up. Because as soon as you give up, it's over. That's it, done. There's no argument. If you don't give up, it's like Schrodinger's cats. Do you know that's quantum physics paradox? Right. But and the paradox, just so that people understand what I'm talking about, in quantum physics, one of the most basic experiments you can do is what's called the Joule split experiment. Look it up. It's all over YouTube. It's everywhere, right? But what this experiment seems to prove is that reality exists both as a wave of probability and a point of reality. And it's only when you observe it that it collapses to whatever point of reality it's meant to be. And the Schrodinger's cat experiment, I won't go through it all, but essentially you've got a cat in a box and the cat may be dead or alive. And so the question is the cat alive or dead? How do you know? And the only way you can know is to open the box, right? And at the moment that you open the box, the probability that it could be alive or it could be dead collapses to a single point of it's alive or it's dead, right? So this is the truth of all our lives. We live in a quantum world, although we are on a macro level. At the quantum level, our cells, the individual particles, the individual things that make up life and reality are all at the quantum level. And essentially everything exists as a wave of probability or possibility until you observe it, until you make it happen, and then it collapses to a point of reality. So the now is the reality. We've collapsed yesterday's wave of probability into a single point of nowness. But tomorrow is still a wave of probabilities. Anything can happen tomorrow, right? Anything. So almost a year ago, I was having a conversation with Steve, and out of the blue, he said, oh, by the way, we're going to be doing Nebworth next year. You're going to be on the bill. Now, he didn't tell me when I was going to be on the bill or where I was going to be on the bill or how I was going to be on the bill, but he just said, you're involved. Well, that's a probability I hadn't even thought about on the wave of probabilities, right? But if just before he said that, I'd say, I've been banging on with Awake for so long and nothing's happened, I'm giving up. He might have not told me about Nebworth because I would have given up by then. So my esoteric point being, whatever it is you do in life, just keep doing it. Don't stop. There are other things in life that will stop you, like death or severe illness. Don't welcome those in and don't hurry them along with your own decisions, because anything might happen tomorrow. Anything. It's just a wave of probability waiting to collapse into a point of reality. And it's how you observe it that makes that happen. So that's why I continue my life. I'm doing the thing I love. You know, we're even talking, because I've just released the new single from the album. The single's called Crazy in the Shed, which is actually in the live show is probably the most memorably impactful song. First of all, because the video's super colorful and a bit crazy. And secondly, because it's crazy catchy. And I have people sending me text messages or putting messages on my Facebook days later going, Tony, I still can't get Crazy in the Shed out of my head. So it seemed like now's the time to release that as a single, put it out into the world, see how much life we can give it and how it can pull people in who hear the song and are intrigued enough to want to know more about what Awake is and what Tony Moore's doing.
I also think Crazy in the Shed is brilliant because it has this sort of twin meaning to it, you know, yourself being able to be incredibly creative in that shed and go crazy. And the second meaning is to sort of, I'm going crazy, yes, like as well, you know, because that's what's yes, so wonderful
and of course
the
there's sort of and I'll tell you how the song even arrived, right? I'm halfway through the album and I'm desperate to finish everything. And I'm talking to Steve maybe 2 or 3 times a week. He's in a different time zone. And at 11 o'clock at night, I've come in from the shed. I've made my mum a cup of coffee and given her a cigarette and sung her a song. I'm in the kitchen making some food. And I'm on the phone to Steve and I say, essentially, I am obsessed with finishing this record within these deadlines. I just feel like I'm going crazy in the shed. And he literally said to me, Tony, that should be the title of your next song. And I went, what a brilliant idea. And I went back to the shed. I stayed up till 6 a.m. writing it. And because of the title, I knew the song had to be quirky and upbeat and fun and not silly, but unexpected, right? And certainly unexpected considering the run of songs that have led up to it. And in a way, it's not a comedy song, but it does make people smile, right? It's almost like a little light relief in the middle of what's been quite a long and deeply progressive and slightly dark setup, right? And so if Steve hadn't have said that to me, I would never have written the song. And so I came up with a title without realizing it, but he realized that I'd come up with a title and let me know about it. And that kind of little spark of backwards and forwards is a lot of what Steve's about. It's about seeing opportunities and encouraging people to make the most of them. You know, aside from me, over the years with the British Lion, he's toured with Air Force, which has Doug Sampson in it. And he's had, who's the other band that I've toured with him? But he supports ex-Iron Maiden members that he has relationships with where he can. So I feel very, blessed that he likes the music so much. And I know he's been a part of the journey and he's heard everything and he knows the story and the vibe and he wants to share that with people around the world. Sadly, of course, we've been doing it for 2 years and we're getting to a point where we've been to so many places together. We've done Japan and Australia and New Zealand, North and South America, Europe, the UK twice, that there's coming a point where I probably won't be able to do a lot more because, it's only good business sense to go out with a new, evening of entertainment, British Lion plus a different guest support artist and not always just be Tony Moore's Awake. Much as he loves the show, much as we have a great time, much as he would like to do that, he's also aware that this is a business. We have to sell tickets and you have to keep people interested in giving them new things. But as I said, he's been a massive supporter and I believe he will continue to be in whatever way he can.
But you're an incredibly inspirational person. I also find you an incredibly generous person. A lot of this interview has been talking about how important other people have been in your life and how talented and how great they are. I mean, particularly Steve, but a lot of other people. And of course, we haven't even talked about Cutting Crew. We haven't even got there.
First of all, I'm a talent junkie. Right? I love people with talent. I love to see people with talent. I love to share stages with people who've got talent. And I love to create opportunities for people who've got talent. And in the late 90s, as a songwriter, there was nowhere in London to go and just play songs, the piano and the guitar, because every gig wanted a band like Oasis or the Stone Roses or, some Brit rock. So I started my own night and I called it the Kashmir Club. I found a basement in a pub. I got lots of my friends in the industry to give me equipment. Celestion gave me speakers. Soundcraft gave me desks. Shaw gave me microphones. And I would find people, I would host the show and pick the acts and find the acts and find other people who were like me, who wrote songs and had nowhere to play. And the first night we were packed. And then we did it every Tuesday night to start with. The next Tuesday we were packed. There was definitely a hunger for this. And there was certainly a lot of artists that wanted to fit in. And I did it because every act that I booked, I loved. I'd introduce them and then sit down and watch them perform. And I learned something from everyone I saw. And this ran for 6 years. And we ended up doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We didn't know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We did 6 nights a week. And we were full 6 nights a week and full of music industry. The amount of people that work in record labels and publishers that I meet now who say, oh, we love the Kashmir Club. We used to come down after work and listen to the music and discover new artists, and loads of people got signed out of it. And so I became an accidental promoter, and that was another part of the butterfly effect of taking me away from my own music. And then I took over a venue called the Bedford in Balham, which I've been at 23 years now. And the first year we had Paolo Nutini when he was 16 turn up, who was amazing. And then James Bay. and then James Morrison and Katie Tunstall, and still the journey continues. Lola Young, who just won a Grammy for Messi, she was playing there in 2017 with her dad as a singer-songwriter, and Nick Shymansky came in, who discovered Amy Winehouse, found her, signed her, and the rest is history. She now has a Grammy, right? So many things have come out of the Bedford and and it's been my joy to create a stage that sounds great and looks wonderful, so artists can be seen and heard at their best and have an opportunity to move to the next level. And I've done that, like I say, 23 years at the Bedford. All of that was a bit butterfly as well until Awake came along. So I'm still doing stuff at the Bedford, but because, booking a venue technically is quite simple. It's done through email, and I have the flexibility to also be an artist. And in fact, I started Awake at the Bedford. I did a show every month for a year, and I used to have people that would come to every single show, because there's something about the show that every time I do it, it's different, even though it's the same. It's different because different things happen, right? I break a guitar strap or break a guitar string or drop a plectrum in the wrong place and have to pick it up, or something's not where it's meant to be and I have to, some people quite enjoy the fact that I have a torturous moment trying to fix something in the middle of a show, and it's a one-man show. There's only me to fix it, right? And they enjoy. It's almost like a Houdini moment, right? They enjoy watching me and seeing me get out of the shit that I've dropped myself in. And other people come because the videos are some of them are so complex in depth. The Crazy in the Shed video, you have to watch it a lot of times to see all the different things that are happening simultaneously in there that I've introduced, just to keep it really interesting and like a depth of editing that was pushing my video filming and green screen skills to the edge.
Tony, listen, it's been great to talk to you. I mean, you really are an inspirational figure, and you really show that success is doing exactly what you want to do, and doing exactly what you want to do leads to bigger success. So congratulations and thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.